here. It's finally here. It's happening. I'm ready to share my brand new craft space with you. Let's chat all things craft room organisation as I share with you my dream craft space. I've got loads of ideas to share with you, from custom made pieces to IKEA favourites to amazing Amazon finds that are super cheap. All of the storage ideas are ideal for small spaces, and nothing you see here is permanent. So if you're renting, or like me, like the option to change things up from time to time, this video is for you. First up, here's a quick pan of the room. As you can see, it's a standard size bedroom and certainly not a huge space. This room is a downsize from my previous craft room, but still plenty big enough for me. The biggest change I've made moving into this space is actually downsizing my biggest storage unit. I used to have a 5x5 cube storage unit here behind me, but I have downsized that to 3 smaller units. I love how they fit along the wall behind me here. It kind of gives a built-in look that's not permanent. And because they're not quite as tall as the previous unit, they're not encroaching into the space so much, so I don't feel so overwhelmed by a towering cabinet behind me. I love too that I can now use the very top as a display area. I can use it as a super long shelf to display some of my favorite things. Let me show you what's inside. I think you're going to be surprised by the amount of supplies that I have. So the very first thing I want to mention is that these Kallax units from IKEA are by no means full of supplies. Many of the cubbies are in fact empty, and that's because I get really overwhelmed when I have too much choice and too many things to manage. I've worked really hard over the past few years to curate my collection so that I'm left with only the supplies that I love. To make things super easy to find, I've created zones within the space, and I'll show you those as we go along. The first zone is for card making and consists of 2 white boxes plus the cubby that's underneath them there. These boxes are from IKEA, and I will be sure to link as many of the organisation products as I can in the description box below. In this first box, I keep my card making tools. So I have a couple of stamp presses, an envelope punch board, and a scoring board. The second box is filled with embossing powders and inks specifically for card making. I really only use these when I'm making cards, and you'll notice that all of the colour selections are very neutral. I have black and white and then a grey and a brown, and I do believe I also have 1 shade of pink. I use these plastic containers and spoons when I'm embossing, so I store those in this container as well. Directly under those boxes is where I store all of my card making bases. I especially love these packs that have the base and the envelopes included, so handy to just grab and get creating. Next up, let's talk about scrapbooking collections. They certainly are the supply that I have the most of. I store them a couple of ways actually within the space, and these 13-inch envelopes I have saved for my most favourite collections. I've reserved 2 of the cubbies in this Kallax unit just for these collections, and they are all Pink Fresh Studio. I love these pouches. They are super high quality and really generous in size. So you can see that the full 12 by 12 inch paper pad fits in there beautifully. And then along with that, I can store every single piece of the collection so that they are all together. I do most of my creating based on a collection, so it's super handy to be able to grab out one of these envelopes and have all of the coordinating supplies ready to go. All of the chipboard pieces, the ephemera, puffy stickers, enamel dots, all of the pieces in a collection can easily fit into this very generously sized envelope, and I love to. They fit perfectly on the shelf there. I also want to show you these clear shelf dividers. These are from Amazon, and what they do is they split up any kind of area that you have on a shelf. And I love them because they help support the collections as they're sitting there. They also make it much easier to pull the collections in and out because they're not resting so much on themselves, but more on these clear dividers. They are super sturdy and they're really high quality, and they make pulling the collections in and out just a breeze. It's a super simple idea, but it works really, really well. You'll see the clip there on the right. That's the bit that clips into the shelf. And then there's a little bit of felt that protects the shelf on the left there. I think every craft space needs at least one set of these. Here are some more containers from IKEA. I use these to store a lot of my smaller embellishments that don't match a collection. These supplies are some of the oldest ones that I have in my stash, leftover bits and pieces from collections long gone. I have grouped them by type in this case, so this box is a bunch of different tags. This next box is filled with enamel dots and brads. These are all the ones that don't match a specific collection that I currently have in the studio. So if I were to buy brand new enamel dots that matched a collection, I would store them with all the other pieces of the collection. These are the ones that I need to use up. This next box is filled with wooden embellishments and chipboard pieces that don't match a specific collection. These have been kicking around the studio for quite some time now. I have been using them up, but they're just not a product that I gravitate to anymore, so they're high on the list for donation. This next box though, I love. It is filled with chipboard frames. There are a bunch in here, all from different manufacturers and collections, and lots of different sizes too. These last two boxes are the consequences of my Maggie Holmes and crepe paper addiction. They include a bunch of ephemera, all from collections from long ago. I have sorted them by colour, but if I'm honest, I really don't think I'm ever going to use these up. I have so many other more complete Maggie Holmes collections, and I know myself, and I know that I would much rather just grab a single collection and work from that. So I'm not really sure what I should do about these, except maybe try a little harder to use them up. Moving on to the next zone, here is where I store all of my sewing and fabric supplies. When I'm not making paper craft projects, I do enjoy sewing. I love slow stitching, and I also love to create mini journals with a mixture of fabric and paper supplies. Here's a look at all of my buttons. I love collecting these. I also have in this cubby some lace and doilies, as well as some vintage patterns. I love the simplicity of being able to store things in big baskets like this. I've spoken a lot on the channel about how it should be easier for you to put away a supply than it is to pull it out, and these baskets are the perfect example of that. When I'm searching for a supply, it's fun to dig through the basket to find what I'm looking for, and when it comes time to put things away, it's really simple to just dump the things in there and go. I am a big fan of storing like items with like because it's the best way to know exactly how much of something you have. This is my adhesive drawer, and it's where I store all kinds of adhesive, double-sided tape, foam tape, tape for my ATG. Anything that is gluing something to something goes in here. Next up, we need to talk about layout storage. And if I'm really honest, they are the one thing that I struggle to store. And I think it's because I just have so many of them, so many layouts. I almost have more layouts than I do supplies to make layouts. Hundreds and hundreds of layouts. And I don't know what to do with them. So I feel a bit like a squirrel. I have hidden away layouts in all kinds of places in this room. I have them in albums, I have them stacked up in this cube storage, and I even have them in a bunch of plastic crates shoved in the back of the cupboard. So, question for you, especially if you're like me and you do have lots of layouts, how do you store them? Should I keep them all? Should I digitize them? Should I just pop a bunch in boxes and then put them away in storage? What should I do? I really need your help. Next up, these are my dream drawers. These drawers are filled with watercolor supplies, and watercoloring is one of those crafts that I have always wanted to do. I often watch tutorials on YouTube for beginner watercolor. I've bought classes, and there's even a couple on Skillshare that I'm really keen to do. The problem is I don't get enough time to watercolor. I find all of my spare time at the moment goes into YouTube, but I'd really like to change that. I've dedicated these two drawers to all the supplies I need, including these gorgeous metallic watercolors. How pretty are they? I've splashed out on a ceramic watercolor palette and added watercolor classes to my creative goals for 2025. Next up, I want to share with you my die storage. So these are all of the dies that would go into my Sizzix machine. I do want to reorganize this a little bit actually because I have two drawers. This one includes thinlet dies and then the thicker dies that cut fabric. And then I have this drawer, which is more stamp and die sets, and then all of my favorite Pink Fresh Studio dies. Normally I store things by either type or manufacturer, but I feel like for my dies I've kind of got that a little bit mixed up, so I would like to reassess these two drawers. What I won't be changing are these envelopes. They are perfect for keeping the stamp and die sets together. I'll be sure to leave a link to them below. I do like to keep them in their original packaging, and then all I do is cut a piece of white cardstock to fit into the envelope, and then I put the stamp and die in one side and then the matching stencil in the back there. The other thing I really like to do when I'm feeling creative but I don't want to work on a specific project, I take some time to pre-stamp and die cut out a bunch of images, and I tuck those into these envelopes so that they're ready to go the next time I do want to work on a big project. In this box, I do have my mini albums. There are more though, actually, I'm realizing as I'm watching this. These are the bigger ones. I do have a clear plastic box that I put the mini albums in. This next drawer is for tools that are hot. So I have my heat gun, my glue gun, and my fuse tool. This is another drawer that probably needs a little bit of organizing. It is mainly filled with embossing folders, but I also have some generic branded dies and some leftover Sizzix things. Here you can see I've swatched out all of the embossing folders and then just added them onto a jump ring for super easy reference. This next box is all things printing, so I have in here my selfie printer along with extra printing cartridges. Underneath that is that clear box of mini albums I was just talking about. And I found this one that really belongs in this drawer. I think I need to do a mini album flip through and show you all of the little albums that I've made. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see. What's this? Another empty drawer? See, you really need fewer supplies than you think. Here is where I store all of my craft books. So these are page maps, there's a scrapbooking one, there's also one on mixed media, and I also happen to have a jar full of friendship bracelets that my daughter and I traded when we went to see Taylor Swift. Next up, let me show you my stamp storage. So box on the right, guess what? It's empty. Box on the left is filled with all of my stamps. These are all the stamps that do not have dies and stencils or anything coordinating with them. They are stamps that I bought most of them many years ago. I particularly love these gorgeous girl ones. They're really fun to colour in with Copic markers. Almost all of the others are background stamps, which I really need to use more of. Fun fact, every time I've moved craft rooms, I have upgraded my wardrobe space. My first craft room was in our dining room, so that space did not have a cupboard in it at all. My second craft space was in a spare bedroom that had a standard wardrobe inside. And now this space I've upgraded again to a walk-in robe. It's a lovely big space, so let me show you what's inside. The first thing I've added to the space is a large set of drawers. Now these would not have fitted into the main area, so if I wasn't able to pop them into the cupboard here, I would have had to downsize this piece of furniture. I'll show you through each of the drawers here in a moment. First, I really wanted to show off these. From time to time, I do get sent happy mail here on the channel, and I love that I have a special place to display it. The containers right at the top there store all of my alphabet thickers, and then the next one down, that is all excess silhouette supplies. And the bottom one here is actually a junk journal that's been created from a book that I'm working on. And these supplies here, well, they have been quarantined because they are from Temu, so they have to go. Moving on to the dresser, and along the top here, I have a bunch of random scrapbook collections. They're a mix of manufacturers and they aren't my favourites if I'm being really honest, except for the Christmas selection, which is here on the left. Onto my mixed media supplies, and yes, I do store these all together. Let's start in this drawer, and I think the first thing you're going to notice is that I have an awful lot of mixed media supplies for someone who doesn't really do a lot of mixed media. It's a lot. What I also want to show you is this clear drawer divider. I'll show you a close-up here in a moment, but I love how it keeps all of the spray mists on the left there, and then I can put paint and paint tools here on the right. This next drawer is filled with my Distress Oxide inks, and I have done a full separate video on how I store them, along with the little ink pads that go with them, so I'll link that below. I also have in here some stencil brushes, I have gelatos, and some coloured pencils. Here's a quick look at the drawer dividers. They're super easy to use. You just lift up the middle section there, position it in your drawer, and then push the top down and it locks into position. Moving on to the next drawer in the dresser, and this one holds all of my sewing machine supplies. This is a container I purchased from Tupperware many years ago, and I do use it as a sewing kit. It has in it all of the thread that I use on my project, so lots of colours to choose from. Along with extra bobbins, I have some needle threading tools and some random bits and bobs, but everything related to the sewing machine. Next up, I want to share with you my sequin storage. This is one of my favourite organisation pieces. I think technically it's bead storage, but I use it for all of my sequins, and I love that it has these separate compartments so that I can store them all by colour. I've even labelled some of the boxes with the manufacturer using a Dymo labeler. I love too that it has a clear lid which secures in place but allows you to see all of the sparkly goodness. Here's where I keep all my pre-printed photos. That is a photo storage box. And then I also have some excess sequins. These are all from Spiegel Mum's scraps and I really like her packaging, so I didn't want to put them into the sequin storage box. I found this very inexpensive clear container on Amazon and it fits the width of the sequin packets perfectly. I can flip through them really easily and I've stored them by colour as well. Even if you didn't have these particular sequins, you could recreate this idea with some little baggies and white cardstock. On to the next drawer, and this one is where I store my fun foam. So I use fun foam to create dimension on my projects. Next to that is my Copic marker storage. This is a marker storage case and I've had this one for many years now. It has held up super well. From memory, this one holds over 100 different markers and I do like how this one folds out flat, which gives you real easy access to all of the colours you have. It's portable but very sturdy and made really well, and the slots for the markers themselves are flexible, so you can store any brand in here that you like. I do also have some random things in this drawer, including these Avery Elle pockets. They're the ones that I use to create the pockets for my stamp and die sets. I also have a bunch of just random scrap papers that I like to use for my junk journaling. Speaking of junk journaling, this is where I keep all of those supplies. I love vintage books and old magazines and patterns and things, so I have collected a bunch of these supplies and they all live in this drawer. The bottom drawer of this unit holds some larger items. There is a giant guillotine trimmer. There's also some pre-made cards. I keep these stored in here ready for special occasions. There's also some officey things like that's a laminator and the laminating pouches. Nothing too exciting, but these things do need to have a home. And what do you know? Some more layouts. These are really old ones, all stacked up in boxes and sitting in the corner of the wardrobe. I have also managed to fit into this walk-in robe another Kallax unit. So this one is tucked behind the door there. I've chosen to put things in here that I don't reach for very often because as it is, I have to open the door fully, step inside the cupboard, then close the door fully to get access to this area. The bottom two drawers are filled with tech, so these are my microphones and charging cables, all that boring stuff. Above those, a row of albums, yes, filled with more layouts. And then above that, I have all of my cardstock. That's my complete collection of cardstock. Every piece of coloured cardstock I own fits into one of these cubbies, and then beside it there is the white cardstock, and then beside that are stencils and specialty papers. And guess what? More scrapbook layouts. These ones though are special because all of these have been published in Scrapbooking Memories magazine. Up the top here I have my microphone and some notepads. That's the microphone I'm talking to you on right now. And next door to that I have my flowers and ribbons. Stacked on top of that is my Pink Fresh Studios mini ink storage. This case makes my OCD heart so happy. It is so beautifully made. It almost feels like a jewelry box. I have the full set of Pink Fresh Studio inks, so of course they fit perfectly into the case. But guess what? It also holds the distress inks, the mini cubes, beautifully as well. I have all the warm colours on one side and then all of the cool colours on the other. It's such a good storage option. I'll be sure to link it below. So here's my question for you. Do you think I should keep the door or remove it and make the cupboard space part of the craft room? Next up, I want to share with you the two custom made pieces that I have. These were both built by a local cabinet maker, and I simply drew a drawing to explain what I wanted, and then he came out and measured up and then made them. This top unit is used to store all of my silhouette supplies. So I have both of my silhouettes in the top section of the unit, and then a really large drawer here in the bottom section. And that's where I store all my blades and extra silhouette supplies. I've got my mats. That's a bunch of cut files that I have pre-cut, just popped into a 13-inch square baggie. And then I do have some excess storage that I've just popped in the right-hand side there. Onto the bottom section, and this was made specifically for these plastic containers. They are 13 by 13 inch boxes, and a brand called Couture Creations, which I believe is only available in Australia, but there are similar ones on the market on Amazon, which I'll link to. I gave the cabinet maker one of these empty boxes, and then he set up this rail system so that I could pull them in and out very independently. I used to have these stacked up in my space, and I felt like I was forever stacking and unstacking boxes. So with this system, I can now pull out each box, often even just with one hand. The boxes themselves are really generously sized, so I can store several collections in each one, and I just separate them with some cheap plastic bags. I then group the collections by manufacturer. So I have on the left-hand side a bunch from Cocoa Vanilla Studio, and then on the right is all of my Maggie Home stash. I have been focusing on using up some of this older stash and even now have an empty box. Now, it wouldn't be a craft studio tour without a Rascog cart, right? I keep mine super close to my desk because all of my most frequently used tools live in this cart. I actually don't like to store supplies and tools on my workspace. I much prefer to be able to completely clear my workspace off in between projects. So all the things you might typically see on a crafting desk, I store in this cart, including my favourite ATG and paper trimmer. This is one of my most favourite parts of my space. It's filled with vintage plates and paintings by Wendy Brightbill. I use this unit as a stand for the TV, and it also is the place to store all of the very boring office supply things that I need. So there you have it, my brand new dream craft space. I've been in here for a few months now, and I've loved working in the space. It's starting to feel like home. If you'd like to learn the best way to organise your craft space so you're spending less time looking for supplies and more time creating with them, you need to watch this video next. I'll see you all again very soon. Until then, bye!